Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us via the World Wide Web on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView, or via Facebook, facebook.com/ttparliament. We welcome you to today's sitting of the House of Representatives. Today is Monday, December 12th, 2016, and in just about 30 seconds' time, we expect that the sitting will begin. There is one paper to be laid. There are 5 urgent questions that will be answered today. And the Minister of Finance is expected to wind up his closing contribution on the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2016. We take you over now to the chamber to start today's proceedings.
The Honourable, the Deputy Speaker.
We welcome you to the 13th sitting of the House in the second session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Monday, December 12th, 2016.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen.
For affirmation, announcements by the Speaker.
Honourable members, Mrs. Christine Nawalo Hussein, member for Kumuto Manzelina, and Dr. Fuad Khan, member for Barataria Sanwan, have requested leave of absence from today's sittings of the House. The leave which the members seek is so granted.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper: the ministerial response to the second report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity on the challenges faced by persons with disabilities, with specific focus on access to services and employment.
Reports from committees, Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there were 5 urgent questions filed in accordance with Standing Order 27, but there's no one here to ask the questions, despite the fact that we have all the answers ready, but there's nobody here to ask the questions.
Honourable members, as identified by the Leader of Government Business, before the House there are 5 urgent questions that were submitted to the Speaker's chamber this morning for approval. 5 were granted, but I have noted that no members of the other opposition are here, so we'll kindly move on at this occasion.
Questions on notice. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honourable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, December 9th, 2016, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replace it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions for the related purposes. I will now call on the member for Degomate Northeast, or the Minister of Finance, who has 13 minutes of his original speaking time. Honourable member, proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, we find ourselves in a very strange situation today, where all of the seats opposite are empty. This would now be the fourth or fifth time.
This is the fifth debate.
Yeah, this would be the fourth or fifth time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the government has come to the Parliament prepared to debate, accommodate whatever reasonable amendments proposed by the opposition, and pass the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act bill. And this is now I'm told it's the fifth. It's the fifth time we've come into this Parliament and we have not received any proposed amendments from the opposition. However, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this matter is too important to allow it to be undermined by those opposite. I noticed a number of statements in the newspapers over the weekend, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I see statement attributed to the new opposition whip saying that the opposition has amendments. This would be the fifth or sixth time the opposition has told us they have amendments to this bill. I see another comment attributed to the former opposition whip asking for a waiver of the standing orders to allow opposition MPs to contribute to the debate. But even if that happened, they're not here. So even if, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we took the unprecedented step, I have never heard of such a thing, where when the person who has introduced a bill has begun their winding up, a motion has been put to the floor to waive the standing orders to allow those who did not choose to speak again. Even if we were amenable to such a novel proposition, they're not here to speak. So one wonders what the opposition is about. And I wish to put on record, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that today the government came prepared to deal with a number of amendments to the legislation which have been circulated to the opposition, and I think it's incumbent on me to go through these amendments. Now, if I look at the complaints of the opposition, which we've had to obtain in a very unorthodox way, by way of a vague and ambiguous newspaper advertisement, if I looked at what the opposition is asking for, we have drafted a number of amendments which we intend to move at the committee stage to deal with the points made by the opposition. I think the most important amendment that we have chosen to make is that there was a complaint that the bill, as originally drafted, would allow the government to declare by order other tax sharing and tax information agreements which the government might enter into with other countries. This was one of the main objections of the opposition, that the way the bill was drafted, and that would have been in the original clause 4 of the bill, where it was provided that the government, through the minister, could declare another tax sharing or tax information agreement signed with another country, such as the one that Trinidad and Tobago signed with the United States of America in August, that the bill would have allowed the minister by order to declare such agreements part of our domestic law. And we've had a second look at this, and we have decided that we would make this foreign account tax bill specific to the actual agreement with the United States of America. So what we have done is that we've taken out the provisions that would allow the government, through the minister, to declare other similar agreements to the intergovernmental agreement between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago with respect to tax information exchange, taken out that provision which would have allowed the minister by order to declare those agreements, future agreements, part of our domestic law. And we have decided that on each occasion we will come to the Parliament as and when required, or use some other mechanism, some other appropriate mechanism to allow parliamentary oversight of agreements entered into between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and any other sovereign country with respect to the sharing of information on foreign accounts, on foreign tax information. So that would cause amendments to clause 4. It would cause amendments to clause 5. And clause 5, for example, reads as follows in its present form: the President may by order declare a tax information exchange agreement specified in the order to be a declared agreement for the purposes of this Act. And this was intended to deal with future agreements similar to the one we signed with the Americans, and we are proposing that be deleted. And we're also proposing that clause 6 be deleted to remove the power of the minister or any person authorized by him to give effect to every declared agreement. We're also removing clause 7, which takes out the power of the minister or person authorized by him for the purpose of giving effect to a declared agreement. All the powers he would have had if he were acting generally for the purpose of or any other particular purpose specified in any act that confers powers on the person. So taking into account the concerns expressed, we are deleting clause 5, clause 6, clause 7, clause 8, renumbering the clauses and now making it very specific to this particular agreement between the United States of America and Trinidad and Tobago.
All references to Minister gone.
So all references, with one exception, to the minister have been removed from the legislation, and the only reference to the Minister of Finance now is with respect to the approval of the guidelines which would be drafted by and prepared by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. So the minister's only involvement now in the sharing of tax information, foreign account information with respect to United States citizens would be after the Central Bank has prepared guidelines for the implementation of this agreement through the financial institutions, through the banks and so on, this would simply be subject to the minister's approval. We have also designated, rather than leaving in the legislation that the minister would be able to designate a competent authority, we have, by virtue of the amendments that we propose, designated the Board of Inland Revenue as the competent authority. So that is the mechanism we have used. So no longer would it be the minister designating a competent authority of his choosing. We have now, again, listening to the concerns expressed, we have designated the Board of Inland Revenue as the competent authority with respect to the sharing of information with the United States Treasury. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I might also make the point, I saw the Leader of the Opposition making a statement in a press conference that this legislation is not important. I find that absurd for the Leader of the Opposition to make that statement and promote that point of view, that the foreign account tax information sharing agreement, the incorporation of that into our domestic law, is not important. And I think the Leader of the Opposition made a further point that this is only designed to deal with big business. Both of those statements from the Leader of the Opposition, that this is not important and that this is only designed to deal with big business, are inaccurate and misleading. Let me repeat, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the problem that will occur if Trinidad and Tobago does not deal with this legislation in a proactive manner. And let me repeat the timelines for those who may have forgotten them. When we observed back in September that the opposition was unwilling to incorporate the agreement with the United States with respect to foreign accounts into our domestic laws, I, on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, in my capacity as Minister of Finance, caused to be written a letter to the United States Treasury, who is our counterpart with respect to this matter, the sharing of foreign account information. And in that letter, we told the United States Treasury that it was our intention to make every possible effort to pass the legislation in both houses of Parliament by February 2017 and to be compliant in terms of reporting by the new deadline of the 30th of September 2017. And it will take some time after the legislation is passed. It will take some time for the central bank to prepare the guidelines. They would be looking at it as we speak, but it will take some time in consultation with the commercial banks and so on. We need to enact this legislation first, thereby empowering the central bank to hold appropriate consultations with banks and so on in order to prepare the guidelines and then implement the guidelines and cause the financial institutions to provide the necessary information to the Board of Inland Revenue so that the Board of Inland Revenue could provide the necessary information on foreign accounts to the United States Treasury.
Honourable Member?
Yes?
Your initial 30 minutes has now expired. Do you care to avail yourself of the additional 15?
Yes.
Kindly proceed.
Thank you very much. Now, as I said on the previous occasion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are of the firm view that we dodged a bullet twice when we came in September 2015, and I discovered that there was a deadline of the 30th of September 2015 for the compliance with the requirements of the foreign account tax information Act of the United States. I sought and obtained a one-year extension from the United States government with respect to Trinidad and Tobago's compliance with reporting. And as the second deadline approached, the 30th of September 2016, and it was obvious, it became obvious that honorable members opposite the opposition, notwithstanding the fact that the former Minister of Finance, my predecessor, had signed an intention to enter into the identical tax information, Mr. Hawaii had signed an intention to enter into the identical agreement that we have entered into. I sought and obtained a further extension to September 2017 because it had become obvious that notwithstanding that fact, they had no intention of supporting this legislation. I am told, I am told that rather than be here dealing with the people's business, they're upstairs somewhere watching this entire presentation on television. This is what I'm told. Mr. Speaker, I honestly, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I really don't understand what the opposition is up to as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. If they have a point to make, they could have come here and they didn't come and ask for the standing orders to be waived. They have not drafted amendments. They have sent us nothing. They could have come in the committee stage and made their point on, as we went through every single clause, we have 30 clauses. So they've had 30 by 18. Each one of them could make a point on each one of the clauses. So you're talking about 400 plus opportunities of the honorable members opposite to make whatever point they want to make. I just find this all very, very odd as a citizen. However, let me go back to the substantive issue. In September, recognizing that the opposition had no intention of honoring the commitment that they made to the United States of America government when my predecessor, Senator Hawaii, signed the intention to enter into the intergovernmental agreement with respect to the sharing of foreign account information and tax information. When it became obvious, I sought and obtained a further extension to September 2017. But the fact of the matter is, that's 2 chances we've been given by the United States. I do not think we will get a third one. And if I'm sure the honorable members opposite are aware of that as well. So I really don't understand what they're about. I really don't understand. Parliament is for speech. It comes from the French word parler. They should be here talking. Where are they? What is going on? This is not democracy, Mr. Speaker. They walk out last week. Now they walk out again. This is what you call the tyranny of the minority. This is what this is all about. But we are a serious and responsible government. We will do everything in our power, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure the passage of this legislation. Everything in our power. As we have said from day one, and what bothers me, Mr. Speaker, is the commentators in this country. There are 23 government votes, and every single one of those 23 members have pledged from day one to vote for this legislation. And really, it bothers me that the commentators can't see that. Every single one of the 23 PNM members on this side are going to vote for this legislation. We need 3 UNC. And why aren't the commentators targeting the UNC with respect to this legislation? I just don't understand. What kind of country is this? They're telling the government that we must demonstrate maturity. What are you talking about? This is the 5th time we have come to debate this bill. This is the 5th time we have asked the opposition to submit propose amendments. And I heard a comment from the leader of the opposition on the last occasion that they have no resources. That is nonsense. When we were in opposition, we drafted amendments to legislation. We submitted amendments. We didn't complain about we have no resources. Sometimes we will be ambushed with legislation, and same day, members of this side, members of the PNM will be drafting amendments. This is absurd. The leader of the opposition has senior counsel. They have all sorts of lawyers available to them who are willing to go to court at the drop of a hat to argue frivolous matters and you know, spend millions of dollars. And all of a sudden they're now saying that they have no resources, they can't draft amendments. It is ridiculous. It is unacceptable. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is unacceptable. And it is a shame and it is grace that some people in this country can't see what is going on. Every time this FATCA debate, this foreign account debate has come to this, the commentators call on the government to do something. Correct. We have 23 votes, all 23 voting for this bill. I mean, I am absolutely fed up, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm absolutely fed up. But we're serious, we're responsible. We have a very mature party. We're 60 years old. We have maturity coming out our ears. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is just it's a tragedy. It's a travesty. It makes you wonder if there's more in the mortar than in the pestle. I heard my honorable colleagues, the Minister of Public Utilities, the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, make some speculative remarks with respect to members opposite that perhaps really they have something to hide. What's going on? Yes, correct. Every PNM on this side don't mind if they share our tax information with the United States. What is their problem? And you know, you get the impression they would like to plunge this country into chaos because it suits them. So they withhold their votes. They cause crisis in the banking sector. They cause correspondent banking relationships. And that's coming back to my original point, where the leader of the opposition said that this legislation is not important. And it is only with big business. That is nonsense, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If this legislation is not passed, not big business, little business, little people will suffer. The small man will suffer. The middle class will suffer. Everybody will suffer because we will be in a situation where we can no longer do transactions with the outside world. So the little man who wants to send a few $100 to his family abroad will no longer be able to do so. The manufacturer who wants to acquire inputs for manufacturing raw materials will no longer be able to do so. People who are studying abroad, if their parents want to send tuition fees by wire transfer, can't be done. People who need medical attention, if this legislation is not passed, they will not be able to transfer money abroad. And it is incredible that someone with the experience of the member for Siparia could pretend that this bill is only about big business. This bill affects all 1.3 million souls in Trinidad and Tobago. Every man, woman, and child. Every man, woman, and child will be affected by this. And the people who are going to hurt the most will be the small people, because they will have no opportunity to find other ways of doing transactions. You know, big people could always find a way to get something done. But the little people are going to be crushed by this action on the part of the opposition, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I appeal to them again, as I appealed in the past. I appeal to the members opposite again. Come downstairs. Come inside. Come inside. Why are you outside? No, I'm telling them come inside. This is the people's house. This is the people's parliament. Come and do the people's business. Don't be cowards. What are you hiding for? Come inside.
Nice one.
No, I dead serious. I mean, I am, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm ashamed to be a parliamentarian today. I'm ashamed. It's embarrassing. What do you think the outside world thinks when they hear about this incident? Empty chairs. What's the point you're trying to make? Empty chairs. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replace it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions, and for related purposes, be now read a second time. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replace it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states, providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions, and for related purposes.
The Minister of Finance.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, as provided by Standing Order 681, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replace it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states, providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions, and for related purposes, be committed to a committee of the whole.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replace it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states, providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions, and for related purposes, be committed to a committee of the whole. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The House will now go into the committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I indicate that we have, the government side has some amendments to the bill, and we are in the process now of circulating them. They're already on the opposition benches, but they're not on our benches. So we just want a few minutes to circulate them and for the Attorney General to consolidate them. Thank you very kindly. 10 minutes should be enough, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you so much.
Honourable members, at this time, I'd like to suspend the House for a period of 15 minutes. We'll return at 2:18.